I'm Lulu. I am the co-founder and executive director of Smart Elections, and I'm here in Washington, D.C. with some technical difficulties and with my colleague, Nathan Taylor.
Hello, I am one of the co-founders of the Election Truth Alliance. I'm happy to be here. We hope to have a good discussion today about all the data we wanted to talk about.
So I think a good place to start is just a little bit of background. I was just starting to tell the people who are here in the room with us, but I'm going to tell the story again. So I started out as a documentary filmmaker, and the first documentary that I made was a film called Holler Back, Not Voting in an American Town. And I was really fascinated about why people vote or don't vote. And so one of the things that I did in this film was we made sort of like a list of about a dozen things about reasons why people don't vote. And we went and did these in-depth interviews with people, like 3 hours long. Like, did people in your family talk to you when you were growing up? Did people in school talk to you about voting? How do you feel about politicians? You know, do you feel that the process is positive or negative? Do you have fun when you do it? All these different things. And one of the things that became clear was that one of the reasons why people don't vote is that they don't actually believe that the votes are counted correctly. And so I thought, well, let's go explore that. And each of these things, we would go and do research. People would say to us, I don't vote because money decides everything. Why vote when they're just going to, you know, make decisions on their donors anyway? So then we would go and we researched that, and we found, yes, donors are very, very significant part of why things get done in Washington. And we looked into lobbying and how much different companies were donating and stuff. So we thought, let's do the same thing with the voting equipment. So I wound up going to Princeton, and I interviewed two grad students there. One, J. Alex Halderman, who has since become basically probably the world's most renowned white hat hacker of voting machines. But at the time, he was a grad student, and this was in 2007. And I took my camera, this camera, I think, or maybe it was the camera before this camera. My husband's here filming. And so I went out there and I filmed. They had a voting machine that somebody had given to Alex Halderman, like in a back alley, literally, like practically like with a trench coat. He went and they gave him this voting machine, because you're not supposed to get access to these voting machines. It's all proprietary. You know, it's like a Coca-Cola recipe, except that it decides our democracy. So they gave him this voting machine in a back alley. It was a US voting machine that was in use across the country at the time. Probably 24 states. And Alex and his fellow grad student did a hack on it. They put a malware program on it, and they were able to change votes. So, and they demonstrated this. So I went out there and we all voted. It was a race between George Washington and Benedict Arnold, and we all voted for George Washington. And then they closed down the election, and then they printed out the official results. And it was 2 votes for Benedict Arnold and 1 vote for George Washington. And the machine, the malware program that they had put, had changed our votes. And those were the official results. And I felt like the floor just like opened under me. I felt sick to my stomach. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, what if this is actually happening? What if the people that we vote for are not the people who get elected? And since that time, I've really been obsessed with it. And this was way before 2020. This was way before, you know, the Stop the Steal. This was 2007. And we put that documentary out in 2008. And I remember at the time thinking, well, as soon as people know about this, this will change. People will take action. And we'll get secure systems, and we'll get audits, and we'll get things that will make sure that this can't happen. And none of that happened. None of that happened. Almost none. I mean, we have had some improvement. There have been some changes in the voting technology. They have moved away from the all electronic machines, and most machines now have some type of paper ballot. So in terms of that, what happened, and my frustration about that, after that, I really started to focus on election security, and I was an election security journalist from that point forward. I did some other things. I worked on another documentary film, but by and large, a lot of my energy I put toward election security. I did investigations that got 4 million views online from a variety of different voting machines that we investigated and showed were potentially hackable. But still, we really didn't see the needle changing. The needle didn't change. And so that was in 2019, we formed Smart Elections because we really wanted to go into advocacy. And we thought we need to get this information to people in a way that can activate them. And so now we have really started to connect with people. And in 2020, we actually connected with a lot of conservatives. We're nonpartisan, and we're really trying to connect with people across the political spectrum, because what we're interested in is not any particular political outcome. What we're interested in is fair, accurate, accessible, secure, transparent elections. That's our new acronym FAST, F-A-A-S-T. So that's some background on us. Smart Elections focuses on those issues, and we're really excited about all the people who have newly become activated around this issue. We're sorry about the circumstance and that people are so frustrated and upset about it, but we do think it's important that people are getting involved, and we're really excited now that we've connected with the Election Truth Alliance, who has very similar concerns, and Nathan has a really useful background in cybersecurity and data. And so I want him to talk a little bit about his background.
Yeah, so I work in the cybersecurity field. I've worked as a data analyst for a company that does real-time data monitoring. So I would watch network traffic for banks and hospitals, and I would see any malicious activity come through. And kind of like if you've seen The Matrix, they're looking at the code, and it makes no sense to anyone who's not kind of been through it. But after a while, I started being able to pick out things, pick out patterns. From there, I was a 25 Bravo in the National Guard, which is a computer tech specialist on the enlisted side. I commissioned with my degree in network information systems, or network security and information systems, and became a signal officer. And the reason why I helped co-found the Election Truth Alliance is specifically because after the 2024 election, many of us who joined this organization, we were concerned that there wasn't an appropriate process to validate the results of the election. We started looking into some abnormalities. We started looking at what processes are actually being held to audit and verify the results. And we felt disappointed. So we're like, well, if they're not going to do it, what does it take? Who can? So we started doing it ourselves. We started saying, hey, let's look at this. Let's use our experience and our expertise and apply it here. And here we are.
So I think let's talk really now about 2024 and about specifically our concerns. So I think I want to give a shout out to Stephen Spoonamore, because I feel like a lot of this was kicked off by his duty to warn letter. And although maybe not everything in that duty to warn letter turned out to be exactly accurate, and Stephen has, gone back and said, okay, not all of this was accurate. I think his initial instinct that there were somehow an unusually large number of votes for the Republicans on the presidential side above the Republican down ballot races, and an unusually small number of votes for the Democratic candidate that were somehow below the Democratic down ballot races. I'm going to say that again. On the Republican side, there are many, many more votes for the Republican candidate, that's for Trump, more than the Republican down ballot races. And we wound up doing detailed analysis of this that we're going to show you. And by and large, we use the Senate as a comparison. But I know some of the other people, like on Reddit and stuff, I heard that they even compared the superintendent race. So we'll talk to you about that, because it's very extreme, this difference. So there's more votes for Trump than the Republican Senate races. And then there's many, many less votes for Vice President Harris than the Democratic Senate races. And this is like uniform in so many counties. It's to such an extreme extent that it really does start to become concerning and looks odd.
You mentioned with Stephen Spoonamore and his duty to warn, he specifically was like, hey, there's indications of abnormalities. And so it was acclaimed to what people call bullet ballots. And now that has kind of been disproven. And I don't believe it's truly that he was wrong. It was just that we didn't have enough accurate data then to fully understand what was going on in the actual races at the local levels. And so now we're more aware that it is this drop-off vote abnormality that's causing that inconsistency.
This is So I think the first thing before we show you this is that it is, I think, important to talk about drop-off and what is drop-off and get you a sense of, how you can understand this for yourself, because I think it does get a little bit confusing. So I think that's a good place to start before we start talking about how extreme the drop-off is that we always explain to people what is drop-off. This is on our website at SMARTElections.us, and if you just go to the drop-down menu and look at more 2024 election drop-off, then you're going to get that chart. You're going to get this page for yourself. And basically, we talk in this page, we explain to you what drop-off is. What is drop-off? It's not a formal term. It's a term that we kind of created to describe this phenomena that is so present in the 2024 election. And what it is, as I said to you, the difference between the votes for president and the next down ballot race. Most of the time we're talking about the Senate. And what we found is that it's extreme. So an example, so this is Arizona. And what the red is both the raw number of votes and the percentage of votes that President Trump had above the Arizona Senate race, and the number of raw votes and the percentage that Kamala Harris was below the Senate race in Arizona. And then you can just see that this goes on and on and on, although California was an exception. But in most of the states, in Connecticut, Trump is above the Senate and Kamala Harris is below. And Delaware looks like an exception, but Florida, these are in alphabetical order. Florida, there's a discrepancy and Trump is further above. And then Hawaii is extreme. Michigan is pretty extreme. So especially one of the things that we noticed was in the swing states, it was more extreme. So if you look at this graph, this is swing states versus non-swing states. In the swing states, there's a huge, huge discrepancy that President Trump has such an exaggerated number of votes over the down ballot races versus in the non-swing states. You can see that it's much more parallel. So now what I want to do is I want to show you how, when I saw these, I was definitely concerned. But I think the next analysis, the next step that we took it to is what really sort of pushed it over the edge to me, where I was like, this isn't normal. This is an abnormal pattern. And it is absolutely enough to make a difference. So these votes in this margin of difference between Trump and the down ballot races and between Harris and the down ballot races, in the 5 of the 6 swing states that we looked at, those numbers of votes are larger than Trump's margin of victory. That is how many votes this is. These are huge numbers, huge. We do not believe that they are what's called bullet ballots. So take a look at the consistency with which we're seeing this. And when I saw these graphs, this is when I said, this is not natural. Right. So in every county in North Carolina, in every county, President Trump is getting more votes than, in this case, it was the Attorney General that we looked at. And in every county, Vice President Harris is getting less votes than the Attorney General. And this is the one where somebody did, was it North Carolina that she did the superintendent's race?
I don't recall.
In one of the states, we actually had a volunteer who did the analysis of the superintendent's race. And she said that Kamala Harris was getting less votes than even the superintendent's race. And we're going to verify that, but that is another piece of data that we've seen recently. So what then, we looked at so many different states and we saw this same pattern over and over again. So this is Arizona, again, identical. In every county, Trump is getting more votes than the down ballot race. And in every single county, Harris is getting less votes than the down ballot race. And so then we looked, okay, look at Montana. It's the same thing. And look how extreme some of those drops are. Those are really, really deep drops that Vice President Harris had below the Montana Senate race. Same thing in Ohio. And I just want to go through these with you. North Dakota, New York, all of these, it's the same pattern over and over and over again.
Very good.
So Hawaii, Connecticut, Wisconsin, A few of these you'll see, and we're going to try to go and look at those. Possibly there were counties where they were able to somehow protect the vote. If you're thinking that this is, if this is our theory that somehow the vote was massaged, was somehow, there were an alteration of the votes, maybe you do see some counties in there that didn't happen, and maybe we can go and compare those. So in terms of like the steps that we might want to take, one of them is definitely to actually try to get a hold of digital ballot images, which are photographs of the ballots that usually get taken in the scanning process, or actual ballots, and that we can hopefully try to compare to the election results.
Now, when the Election Truth Alliance started looking at some of these patterns across the swing states specifically, we had two theories of what could cause this. And so those two theories that we are arguing is for a candidate to consistently underperform their next down ballot candidate, like senator, like this, it's either they were unpopular, or this could be an indication of an algorithmic hack at a lower level. And so what I had done, and we have this in the slide as well, but I had actually calculated the turnout from 2020 compared to 2024 in the swing states for both parties, and specifically the Democratic Party. And candidate Harris, so we'll show you this graph real quick, just showing the voter turnout for the 7 swing states from 2020 to 2024. Both candidates are represented, or both parties are represented, Biden in 2020 and Harris in 2024.
And I think the other thing that is really interesting about this is that Election Truth Alliance has done analysis of previous years, and we want to show you those also. So this pattern is not the same if you go back to like 2020, 2016 in the states that we've looked at. The next thing that we're doing is we're having this work actually looked at by statisticians. We have some good relationships, especially with an academic statistician who actually writes statistical textbooks at the University of Alabama. And he's working with us. And we actually that was one of the things I was talking about just tonight. We got in an assessment from him about this data. And so we want to share that with you also.
So we did a comparison. This is new, actually. We just finished checking this today. And so this is Ohio specifically. And so we started looking at past elections, and specifically past races that we could show, and this is for the Senate. So the president versus the Senate for Ohio all the way back to 2012, and then we have 2016 and 2024. And so I think as you highlighted, Lulu, we're arguing this is what more traditional results look like for both candidates.
This is just crazy.
And realistically, presidents are supposed to be popular candidates. Like, they are the top of their party. And so both of them can be successful, and both of them can exceed the next down ballot candidate. And that's generally what we see is it is, we would say, random in this case.
And you see variety there. You see that in some counties, each one of those little bars, each one of those little red and blue bars is the vote for president versus it's the measure of the drop off. It's the difference between the president and the down ballot race on the Republican side and on the Democratic side. And you see the variety, and it's each one of those bars is a county. In some counties, the Democratic candidate was unpopular, and you see the blue go down there, like in 2020 or in 2016. And then in other counties, you see it go up. And that's normal. That's normal voting behavior. And what is so abnormal to us is when you get into that 2024 and you see that uniformity, and you see no variation, and that looks like a program. That looks like an algorithm to us.
And our approach, the way we approach this is we want to be nonpartisan. So especially with my organization and me as well, I want to approach this in a way that I don't have bias for either party. So I look at the data and I analyze what could cause these results. And as we said, the two indications that really would cause someone to underperform would be if they didn't have as many people vote for them, or this was manipulation. And so I did this analysis, and actually I had So Good, he's a user on Reddit and a statistician, he replicated this as well. So I had him re-replicate my original analysis on the vote turnout across the 7 swing states. And so this was kind of one of the ways I was like, well, if candidate Harris was unpopular, and that's why she's underperforming across multiple states, let's look at how many people actually voted for her compared to how many Democrats voted in 2020. And you can see by this graph here, the margins are very thin, are very close for both parties. And so when we actually look at how many votes, if you read the graph, the dark blue is Harris for 2024, the lighter blue is Biden for 2020, and then the two different shades of orange and red is Trump for both years. And so what you notice, Nevada, North Carolina, and Wisconsin, if I said that right, it goes down to the 0.1 decibel, but Harris actually is overperforming, or she got more votes. She got more votes than Biden in 2020 in those states. And in the other states.
And which states are those? That's in Nevada?
That's Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, and Wisconsin.
She's outperforming Biden.
Exceeded Biden this time compared to 2020. And then in the other states, she's under just 0.1 of the distribution. And so I did the math. 99.5% of the Democratic base that voted for Biden in 2020, Harris got 99.5% of those votes. And so the issue is she's significantly underperforming across multiple states, but she's only 0.5% in the swing states under Biden. So why is she negative by a significant amount? And so this doesn't really match the theory that Harris was an unpopular candidate across multiple states. It doesn't match.
So the
questions
concept that Nathan said to me that I have to say kind of blew my mind. One possible way of explaining this is that Harris actually expanded the Democratic base significantly above and beyond what Biden did, that there could have been a huge turnout for her and a vote for her, but that she did not actually receive those votes, that those votes were in some way suppressed or moved to another candidate, or somehow they weren't counted. That would be one way of explaining how she seems to be getting as many votes as Biden, but at the same time, she's somehow underwater. She's somehow still not getting as many votes as the other presidential candidate. And I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm saying that we're working with different theories. We're saying the data is odd. It does not look natural. And we're trying to figure out what happened. And we appreciate all of your ideas and all of your thoughts about this. There's been so much involvement. I will say, if you want to get involved, please do. If you go to SMARTElections.us, there is a form there to fill out to volunteer. And also at the ElectionTruthAlliance.org, we also have multiple ways you can reach out and volunteer your time, your service, if you want to help in some way, if you have skills. We also post lists of assets, skills that we if you have a specific skill set, we post lists as well. And we should also just take time to say we both also are accepting donations. So it actually is expensive to fund this work. Really grateful for our donors, especially who made this weekend possible. Thank you so much. Are we allowed to shout you out? Yes, thank you so much to Michael Smith. He's been one of our great donors. And we have another really wonderful donor, Lori Grace, who's been tremendous helpful to us, and really, really appreciate them and all of the other donors who have pitched in and made our work possible. So please do feel free to donate. I know at SMARTElections.us it's tax deductible, so do feel free to donate there. And you guys have your donate up?
We are registered, yes. And well, we have a new donation system that we're working on. Currently, we're using GoFundMe, and we did finally get our nonprofit status finalized.
Nice. So that's good news. There's a few people in the chat are saying things like, please tell us what to do. So I think this is why we're here. This is why we're talking to you. We are telling you what to do. We just said, go to our websites, sign up to volunteer, donate, and get involved. And then somebody else down here is also saying, talk to the press about it. I think that's really great. Reach out, do letters to the editor. So what we covered so far, we covered what is drop-off. We covered the fact that the pattern seems to be unnatural and overwhelming. And then we also talked about the fact that there may be different explanations for it. We talked about the fact that it's strange that Vice President Harris did so well in comparison to President Biden, and yet somehow still the numbers didn't add up. So somehow the math isn't mathing, as they say there. One of the things that's really problematic about this issue is that there's a lot of shame involved in it. There's so much shame, and it's really unfortunate. We're not supposed to question the election results. It's so taboo, especially I would say among academics. So I think one of the most useful things to do is to go to your academic community. If you have professors, political science, statisticians, people, you know, who you respect, go to them and say, I want you to take a look at this because I'm really concerned about it. And I really want you, if you're concerned about it, to speak out or to try to get comfortable talking about it, because there was so much shame put on the conservatives in 2020 when they spoke up about this. And that same type of shame is being directed at progressives when they're trying to speak up about this now. We have all sorts of negative words in our culture about people who are just not confident that the election results are accurate.
Add to that, everyone, when I started, you know, being involved in doing and publishing these findings, everyone was saying, hey, you know, this is election denial. Well, it's not, because this is election analysis. That's the point, is our free and fair and transparent election, we should be able to make sure that your votes were counted correctly. And that benefits everyone. It's not a political issue. It's not a party issue. It's a constitutional.
I think one of the things we want to kind of transition into is, how does this type of thing happen? And so I'm going to actually take a minute and set up a video here. So one of our technical advisors, Benny Smith, is a Tennessee election commissioner, but he's also a software programmer, and he's also a very talented hacker. And he designed what he calls a proof of concept, a program that moves votes from one candidate to another candidate using fractions. He designed it by actually using a program that was part of the voting machine software. So he used the program in the Diebold system. The Diebold system, for some reason, has within it, within the formal program that came with the voting machine, a program to allocate votes fractionally, meaning you vote for me and the vote counts for like 1.5, and you vote for Nathan and the vote only counts for half. So this is just one example. There are many, many ways that you can do this, but this is an example. And we took this demonstration to the Senate. We actually, to the US Senate, we did a briefing there in 2019. And I'm going to show you the demonstration of that. Okay, so this is 2019, this is before 2020. Smart Elections went to the US Senate as part of trying to get some legislation passed to improve the voting machine security. And we brought Benny Smith as part of our team, and he did this demonstration. And basically we asked someone from the audience to come up, and they got to pick who voted. I mean, they got to pick who won the election. And these were actual votes from Tennessee. That's where Benny is from. And he just used an actual election and he reshuffled it. And you don't actually see his screen super close up in this version, which I apologize. We have another version that I will post on our website or on Blue Sky later, where you can see more the close up of the screen, but you will definitely understand what he's doing here.
First race is a governor's race. It's, if you guys look at the total, Bill Haslam has 38,000. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, can you blow it up?
I'll zoom in. He has 38,212 votes, and this is the representation of the real totals. This is actually what actually happened in Shelby County. Well, what was reported in Shelby County. So
do a screenshot so we can compare.
Yeah, I'll do a
later.
screenshot of it.
You can basically change the entire roster if you want, right, Benny?
Yeah, I can change everywhere where there's more than one candidate, for sure.
So should we pick our person now? Is it time?
Pick our person.
Okay, so we need a volunteer from the audience who would like to be the person who gets to pick who's going to be governor.
Does anybody want to be dirty?
I see somebody back
Okay.
there. Raise your hand.
We have a criminal in the midst.
Okay, come on up.
We're kindred spirits today. Yeah, we're all dirty. Okay.
Just take a look at
Well,
the screen.
let's take a look.
And you can use my mic here.
So these are the totals, and this is basically what people in Shelby County see, and anybody across that universe. So we're gonna work for the governor's race. Who would you like the winner to be?
Well, I really think the name Basil is interesting, so we're going to go with Basil.
Well, he's only got 219 votes. You think we can pull that off? Basil is like a seasoning or something. Like we'll season his votes to make him the winner. Okay. So I'm gonna open fraction magic. it is largely unnoticeable. It is running. It's in the top right corner, and you can't see it. I mean, you can try to see if you see it. So the way I designed the program is to kind of hide in plain sight. So just watch my cursor, though. If you follow my cursor, you see it change? Can you see it went from a you see it went from all right, so I'm gonna type this code in that brings up, now everything you're gonna see, they're gonna be in black boxes. I did this in collaboration with blackboxvoting.org, so I made everything in black boxes so you know what is not in the application and what is the application that I designed. So I'll open it up. And it's basically reading the voting database to tell me everybody's running. So these are the options. Again, this is what Appel was explaining, that once a person gets in, they can just hijack the system and take over. So I think you said Basil. Okay, so let's take, we'll make Joe Kirkpatrick come in second place. And you said Basil is going to be the winner. So Joe Kirkpatrick is, he's got a low vote total too. So he's gonna have a good night too. So basically these are the allocation rules that I preloaded these allocation rules. So each precinct, each polling location, he is going to win 37% of the total. It's like 20 candidates in the race. So that's enough to declare him the winner. And Joe Kirkpatrick is going to get 46% of everything that remains. And this one has some complexity in it where you can see it, where I'm changing the allocation rules, because it's got to mimic realistic results, right? And it's pretty realistic. So we're going to come out of this, and I'll open the program again because now I'm going to run it, and I'm going to inject those allocation rules into 80,000 votes, 77,000 votes. All right. So I'll run it again. This time I'm going to type a different code. And if you guys want to look at this thumb drive, it's going to hum. I always use the thumb drive because everybody says, well, it's a thumb drive. We checked it. No, that sounds good, but everybody's got to use some type of media to do something. So this thing is going to hum for about maybe 10 seconds, but it's going to go through the whole thing like a peanut butter sandwich. So I'm going to type the code in. 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000, 6 1,000, 7 1,000, 8. So 8 seconds didn't make me look bad, and this is an ethical swap. So I know y'all, I'm not a thief. I'm representing one, but I'm not a thief. All right, so everything is still up. So now we got to see what the new totals are, right? So let's close this report, but not close the application. So let's just preview the next batch of results. All right, so we now have a new winner. And our winner is going to be Basil.
So he basically took a candidate that had like 200 votes, very, very small number of votes, and he shuffled those votes and he turned that into like tens of thousands of votes in 8 seconds. I want to say one thing while he's setting that up. Benny talked about the flash drive, and sometimes Benny talks a little bit in slang, so you can't always understand exactly what he's talking about. But he's like, everybody always says, it's just a flash drive. Like, what's the big deal with a flash drive? The reason why he's pointing that out is that almost all of our election results are held on flash drives. That is where the votes go. When they're in the voting machine, there is a USB port and there's a flash drive, the same type of flash drive that you put like your photos and your music on. That is where the votes are, is in that flash drive. So if there's a program on the flash drive, if there's a program that has come in through the USB port onto the system, it can run that malware on that flash drive. It's not, the flash drive is very like uniform in terms of our voting systems. The election results are contained on flash drives, and the flash drives are in USB ports, and they are very susceptible to programming. And so that's why he emphasizes that it's on a flash drive, is because that's meaningful.
So as we saw with the video, and as we're saying, a potential concern for us is you could change the results of a voting session and make anyone win. And the reason and the way you do that, as you said, is you would use an algorithm to change the votes. And so a part of what I've been doing specifically in the Election Truth Alliance is our question is, if you were to change the votes of an election at the vote counting level, are there indicators when you do this, right? Because as you saw, Basil won. Well, all of those votes got shifted around. Is there any way that we could see indicators that those votes got moved and were actually changed by a machine? And so a part of what we've been doing in analyzing the CVR data for the county level, we said, hey, are we able to see indicators of manipulation at those vote counting levels? And so I'll just quickly run through that. We looked at Clark County, Nevada as an example of this because we had that data at that level. And so we were able to see mail-in ballots, which what we did is, remember when we talked about how candidate Harris was underperforming across multiple states, specifically the swing states. And so this is interesting that when we look at mail-in ballots, one of the three types, so there's mail-in ballots, there's early voting, and there's election day, we see that she's not significantly underperforming. She's actually matching Senator Rosen in Clark County, Nevada for 2024.
And the percentage here, this is really interesting. So in mail-in ballots in Clark County, Nevada, Harris is getting 60% of the vote, and Trump is getting there a little less than 40% of the vote.
We're also going to look at election day,
Okay.
but first, so this is one way that we showed this data, and the way you read this graph is this is as you count the votes in a machine, it shows a percentage of the votes. So each of these dots, there's two dots, there's a red and a blue dot for each counting session. So as you feed in ballots into the tabulators for mail-in voting, and there's 9 tabulators they used in Clark County, I believe, we see that as you feed in votes, you kind of get this, I would say, random pattern, right? And it's very diverse, but ultimately the winner is determined by whoever gets the most votes at a higher percentage. So as you feed in ballots, and so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of say, hey, so mail-in ballots looks like this. And so as I said, we didn't see candidate Harris underperforming. We didn't see that drop off negative performance like we see everywhere else at large. And so when we start looking at other of the voting types, we looked at election day. And this is Clark County as well. There's a little bit of formatting error because it got moved around a bit, but no worries there. So on the left is 2020. On the right is 2024 for election day. And the way you read this as well is on the right portion, you have the number of votes per tabulator, and on the left, it's the same percentage. And so similar pattern to mail-in ballots, right? It's just it's a random distribution of votes. And there's not really any key concerns here. I'm not seeing any large indicators of manipulation. These are 2 of the 3 types of voting. We look at early voting in Clark County, Nevada for the 2024 and the 2020 elections. And this is where the concern is, if candidate Harris was underperforming, we just saw in the other voting types that there wasn't a significant underperformance there. They were both chaotic, and candidate Harris overperformed in mail-in ballots. She got a majority of the votes in mail-in ballots. Election day, it was more of an even split. But early voting, not only do we see indications of manipulation, as per the Election Truth Alliance's theory, we see indications of manipulation in that this voting data doesn't look normal. And this would explain why she has that negative drop-off vote, is because we see her heavily come in at a lower percentage. And so on the right here, as I'll kind of show in 2024 for Clark County, we see that blue represents candidate Harris, red represents candidate Trump. And so we'll see that a majority of her votes are sitting at or below the 40%. And a majority of candidate Trump's votes are sitting at or above the 60%. It is the opposite of mail-in voting.
That's what I think is so interesting. And it took me a while to see that. I had to look at Nathan's slides a few times, but then it finally clicked with me. So in mail-in voting, Harris is getting 60% and Trump is getting 40% approximately. And then when you go into, and the distribution looks normal and chaotic, but then when you go into the early voting, it's
inverted.
And then you see Trump is getting 60% and Harris is getting 40%. And instead of looking like a normal, some sort of random distribution, you're seeing this very distinct pattern that looks more programmed.
And the main concern, you're right, yeah. And
right?
the main
potentially programmed.
Yes, and the main concern here is, as I said, when you read this, The bottom portion is the number of votes per tabulator. And the concern, the reason why we're worried that this is an indication of a vote flipping hack is because we see starting out in, for example, 2020 as more of a baseline, you see that random amount of votes in the beginning. But then as more ballots are fed into each tabulator, and as I said, both of these, all of these dots represent a tabulator. There's a red and a blue for each. As you feed in more ballots into the tabulators, you begin to see a shift in a pattern. For example, in 2020 in Clark County early voting, we see this pattern start to occur after around 600 ballots are fed in. This is concerning because we don't see these problems in the other types of voting, but we only see it in early voting. And so when we look at Clark County for 2024 early voting, we see that shift happen way sooner, way more aggressively. After around 400 ballots are fed, and then you start to see them heavily separate. And so this is a concern, is we say this shows indication of a algorithm to change votes.
We are working now with people who have doctorates in statistics, and we reached out to he's not a formal advisor, but somebody who we have worked with really quite a bit. And what he said about this, he's just starting to look at it, and so he hasn't had a lot of time with it, but he said there is a very strong correlation, like coefficient, in both 2020 and 2024, and that they're both extremely statistically significant. And this was in North Carolina that he looked at. And he said that that took him by surprise. He said, I would not have thought that the R and the D would have such a strong correlation, because he said they're two different populations and you would not expect this negative correlation. So this correlation that we're seeing is taking him by surprise. He does have a doctorate in statistics. He writes statistical textbooks. And what he said at this point is, this was really, I thought, heartening to me. He said, you and your team, and in that he's including the ElectionTruthAlliance, because we're sending him their data as well. You and your team have done an impressive amount of data analysis worthy of a much more sophisticated look. So that's a really helpful sign to me. What it's saying is that somebody who I respect professionally and who has a deep, deep level of experience in statistics thinks that this is very serious and worth looking into further. And he is confirming that there is this strong, when statisticians say something significant, usually what that means is that there is less than at least a 0.5% chance of it happening randomly. It can be much less than that. It could be 0.1%. We don't have a percent of, analysis yet. We did do some p-tests earlier, and they did come back very, very strong in the sense it was highly unlikely statistically, but we haven't published them yet. We are just in preliminary stages of this. And what he is saying is that he's looked at this and there is a very strong statistically significant correlation. And so it is worth looking into further. So that's, I think, that's one of the important points that we want to make tonight. That's new. We're getting this level of expert examination of our process.
So one thing I wanted to highlight is the reason we went down and we looked at Clark County at that lower level is because our argument is that drop-off vote abnormality at the high level, candidate Harris underperforming across multiple states, swing states and not, that is, in our opinion, in the ElectionTruthAlliance's opinion, that is a symptom of the cause, and the cause was at that lower level, potentially votes being changed and shifted, and that's why she would be looking like she's underperforming, is because they took her vote totals.
Okay, so what we want to show you is that we've been working on this spreadsheet for months. I am so sorry that we haven't been able to get it public yet, but we are very close to releasing it publicly, and this is sort of a sneak preview tonight. So there were far, far more bomb threats than have generally been reported. Generally, it was reported around 60 bomb threats. There were more than 200 bomb threats, and we have tracked all of them very meticulously. So I want you to watch this spreadsheet. Are you seeing it?
It's good, yeah.
Okay, so there were bomb threats, there were swatting and arson threats, and also, as many of you know, there were drop boxes that were actually set on fire. Okay, so if you look on the left side of the chart, it's the bomb threat, it's the county and the states. You're seeing first Alabama, and you're seeing those counties in Alabama. Those counties didn't have bomb threats, and what we show in our chart is the technical issues. There were a lot of technical issues. So this is going to kind of overwhelm you because there was just so much information. But some of these are like really, really interesting. Like ESNS did not send enough ballots for the 1,700 people who were registered to vote at the polling location. Print issues, ESNS incorrectly printed 28,000 ballots, leaving off a statewide amendment and a local one. So these were just kind of like, what we did was we tried initially to correlate the bomb threats with the technical issues. And we're not sure yet if there's correlation. Some of the technical issues were very serious, like there were USB ports. And remember we talked about USB ports and how the flash drives go in there. In I think it was in Milwaukee, there were USB ports where the seal was broken. And so that was something that the election official said, well, really, it wasn't a big deal. And then they did rerun the ballots, but they reran the ballots through the same machines. So they reset the machines is what they said and reran the ballots. But these are things that we're in the process of tracking down. But so there's technical issues and there's bomb threats on this list. So I'm going to start, there's Alabama, and then you're going to go in and you're going to start to see now, these were all the bomb threats in Arizona.
Right.
Yeah, these were all the bomb threats in California. These were all the bomb threats in Georgia. There were over 60 in Georgia alone. These were all the bomb threats in Maine. Maine, it was swatting attempts. Maryland, these were all the bomb threats. In Michigan, bomb threats.
If I may ask, who was attributed or what was attributed to the source of these bomb threats?
Let me just keep showing you. New York, bomb threats.
Everywhere.
Oregon, Pennsylvania had a huge number of bomb threats. And then it just goes on and on and on. These have not been widely reported, and there's no investigation that we've been aware of. I mean, maybe behind the scenes there's investigation, but so far we've counted 215 bomb threats. And what we're doing is we're actually breaking these bomb threats down at this point. So we have charts, we break them down by state type, we break them down by also technical issues, and we also are breaking them down by the voting machine vendor, and also actually even by the voting machine software. So we're trying to figure out, about these bomb threats, what do they mean? And what, if any, is there any correlation to the election results? And what did you ask me?
I was asking, was there ever a statement about who actually was initiating these bomb threats?
So the general, if you read the articles about these, they're saying that the bomb threats are of Russian origin. And the problem with that sort of assumption, that the emails came from Russian email servers or Russian email, I guess, websites, but it's not hard to spoof that. It's not hard to send an email and make it look like it came from another region or a particular server. We aren't finding any indication specifically that these are Russian bomb threats. The language is very, they're all very consistent language. It's very sort of comfortable American English. They tend to come from MAGA email addresses or supposed MAGA email addresses, hard to say. They actually are very similar in language to other bomb threats that we found in other countries. There were actually a series of bomb threats in India that have almost identical language. So again, even though we've been working on this for months, we're trying to track this information down. One of the things that is really important to look at with the bomb threats is they were predominantly in Democratic counties, very predominantly. And we actually have a map of the bomb threats, and it's basically the East Coast and the West Coast and some down in the South in Florida, but it's very clearly Democratic counties and often the larger Democratic counties that had these bomb threats.
People are asking, what was the potential impact of the bomb threats?
It's just that we don't know. Yeah. So much of this we just don't know, and we don't understand where's the investigation. We've never had an election that I know of in this country where there were over 200 bomb threats on election day. Many of these locations were closed down. They were evacuated. What happened to the ballots during that time? Yeah. Was there periods of time that the voting machines were unattended? Yeah. We're trying to get surveillance footage of what happened. It's just completely been brushed under the rug. This is really remarkable. Over 200 bomb threats on election day and nothing, no investigation.
Right.
So this is something that we want you to know that we're really trying to track down. I want to say one more thing. Let me stop sharing this. So the other things that we're going to be putting out shortly, and that we've really been working on, there's also a lot of information about different ways to manipulate voting machines and election results. And some of this stuff was just widely spread on the internet. So we have a researcher who's been tracking down specific tweets where it says, this is code to move votes from one candidate to another. And these were posted on X around August of 2024, before the election. There were 2 separate posts that give you actual code of how to flip the votes. We've had that code assessed now by an academic and by an engineer. And both of them said basically the same thing, which is that this is basically a decent template for moving votes. It's not actually like everything that you would need, but it's a good guideline. And then we want to actually try to get it tested to see if it would work. And there's also other code that's been put forward, code from a Serbian poster that was code about how to access voting machines remotely, and another code about how to smooth an algorithm. And those codes also were posted online. So we want you to know that we're working on that and that that is coming. And we also want to say something very, very important to anybody who's watching this. Our researcher got something that she considered a threat to her safety today. And we want you to know that that information is not isolated with that individual. We have researchers doing a lot of different research, and all of that information has already been shared. We have that information archived. Many, many people are aware of this information already. So anything that any of our researchers have is already archived and backed up. And there is absolutely nothing that you can gain by doing any harm to any of our researchers. That information is already archived and we have it. So please do not think about approaching our researchers or injuring them or, stalking them or doing anything, intimidating them in any way. We will go to the police or we will go to the FBI. We will do whatever's necessary. We are not going to be intimidated. This is really, really important work. And we want you to know that there is nothing, absolutely nothing to be gained by affecting anyone's safety on our team. And thanks so much to everybody who's been here. I'm going to just shout out again, please check out our website, SMARTElections.us, and your website.
ElectionTruthAlliance.org.
Yes, please donate. Please sign up to volunteer. Please get involved. And
share.
also our Substack. Please subscribe to our Substack, Smart Elections Substack.